That day, as the man casually spun the dial before him, he was attacked from behind. A few punches knocked him to the ground, and before he could understand what was happening, a spear was thrust directly into his heart. It was clear he was dead. When the others arrived, they found Jen covered in blood, unable to move. They thought he was beyond saving given all the blood. However, Senku urged them not to panic. He pulled out the spear, and beneath it was a bag of blood, and his body was covered in blood bags. Indeed, a magician to the bone, he had made ample preparations just in case. Although Jen was not in mortal danger, he was seriously injured. Who attacked Jen? Suka volunteered to investigate. The next morning, Detective Suka obtained crucial information. It turned out that the culprit was Maguma from the village, who saw science as sorcery. He believed Kahaku's strength was solely supported by sorcery, and without it, Kahaku would be just an ordinary girl. Thus, Maguma mistook Jen for a sorcerer and attacked him fatally. But why would Maguma want to kill Kahaku? This puzzled Senku. It turned out that the village had a tradition passed down through generations. Every 20 years, a martial arts competition was held. Whoever won the competition could marry the village priestess and inherit the position of the village chief. This issue dates back to a few months ago when Ruri, the village priestess and Kahaku's sister, held the competition according to tradition, leading to a final showdown between Maguma and Kahaku. After advancing to the final, Maguma revealed his selfish intentions. He hoped Ruri would pass away soon so he could inherit the position of the village chief. Seeing this, Kahaku was immediately filled with anger and declared that she would never hand her sister over to such a man. It was precisely Kahaku's reckless behavior that led to her estrangement from her father, the village chief, as she disrupted this year's competition. Therefore, a rematch was scheduled for the next month. Maguma, in his quest to win the championship, killed Jen to remove an obstacle. If Maguma became the village chief, even if they managed to produce antibiotics, they would have no opportunity to administer them to Ruri. Therefore, it was essential that a man from the Kingdom of Science win the championship, with Kinro and Jinro being the best candidates. Kinro and Jinro put forth 200% effort, and Kahaku subjected them to rigorous training. The competition was left to the combat team. Chrome admired the two as they practiced hard, and Kahaku instantly saw through his feelings. Although she knew his deep affection for Ruri, she realized that he stood no chance against Maguma. Then, Chrome decided that as long as they developed antibiotics and cured Ruri's illness, making her happy, that was enough. He promptly joined Senku's science team to focus on producing antibiotics. The next day, Chrome was awakened by Jinro, and Jen had disappeared, presumably to report back. Kahaku was about to stop him, but Senku intervened. In fact, when Senku had created electricity, Jen had already decided which side to join, and he made his request the previous night. He wanted a bottle of Coke. Jen, returning to Tsukasa, claimed he hadn't found Senku, presumably dead, thus forging the cheapest alliance in history with just a bottle of Coke. Back at the Kingdom of Science, what had caused the lively and cute little girl to suddenly appear old and decrepit? It turned out she had a strange illness called blurred disease, where everything she saw was blurry, and she could only make faces to see better. In their Stone Age world, of course, they didn't know that this was just ordinary myopia. The best way to cure blurred disease was to make lenses, which meant they needed glass. In the Stone Age, producing glass was relatively simple. Senku, led by Chrome, went to the place where he used to collect crystals, which could be found on weathered granite, and the sand there was the needed silica sand. Hearing that collecting was so simple, the worker trio collected vigorously. They ground the collected silica sand into fine sand, mixed it with other materials, and melted it in a furnace. With everyone's relentless effort, the transparent crystal glass needed for the lenses was finally completed. Of course, it wasn't over yet. The final step was to use a grinding machine to adjust the depth of the concavity. After continuous adjustments, they finally obtained the finished product. The lenses, placed on Suka's headgear, fit perfectly, not too big, not too small. Afterwards, Senku took Suka to a place bathed in sunlight. When the nearsighted Suka put on her headgear, the world instantly switched from standard definition to 4K quality. Suka couldn't help but shed tears of excitement. She never thought she would see the world clearly again one day. The significance was profound. However, Senku's intentions were not purely altruistic. In an instant, his capitalist nature was revealed. With the help of the glasses, Suka's work efficiency indeed increased. Returning to the main point, the earthenware was no longer sufficient. To continue the experiments, it was necessary to produce glass containers. Making glass containers was also quite simple. Just heating obsidian would produce many white bubbles, which were excellent insulating materials suitable for making glass shaping furnaces. Next, They needed to make iron blowpipes. The final step was to blow the glass into expansion. After 81 attempts at forging, they ended up with a bunch of defective products, all blown into odd and bizarre shapes. Senku believed that to master the rhythm, at least 2.5 years of practice would be needed, but Ruri's body was gradually weakening. They simply did not have that much time to wait. This reminded Chrome of a person, and he immediately brought out the village's most experienced old craftsman, Senku, who had lived for 3,700 years, was also seeing such a desperate plea for the first time. Moreover, the old craftsman had no fondness for sorcerers, especially since his wooden bridge had been dismantled last time. Senku, however, was calm because he knew how to deal with such craftsmen. He then started blowing glass in front of the old craftsman. Seeing how the materials were being wasted, the old craftsman could no longer endure it. He displayed his absolute strength by showing off his muscular physique. Indeed, professional tasks should be left to professionals. After a whole day of glass blowing, all the glass needed for the experiments was produced. The experiment to produce antibiotics was also back on track. Meanwhile, the combat team was still preparing for the competition next month. It turned out Kinro also had blurred disease, but he didn't allow Jinro to speak out because in this conservative Stone Age, he felt that blurred disease was not something to be proud of, but rather a disgrace. Unbeknownst to him, it was precisely because of Kinro's whims that the Kingdom of Science was put in a dangerous position in the next competition. Although they both underwent devilish training every day, they inevitably entered a period of exhaustion. At this time, Jinro suggested that if each of them could have a bright spearhead, not to mention any competition, they could easily take down UFC. Mentioning the golden spear, Kinro immediately stood on the same side as Jinro. They then approached Senku to ask for golden and silver spears. Senku and Kahaku discussed. It seemed that if they did not make them, the two would definitely not train at ease. Since the laboratory was already built, he simply made a silver spear for Jinro. Everyone knew Senku was a notorious capitalist, and there would definitely be a price to pay. The production of antibiotics had reached its most critical step, and the materials needed had to be obtained from an extremely dangerous place. The silver spear was essential for finding these devilish materials. The next day, Jinro, holding the spear, moved forward slowly, his eyes fixed on the spearhead and breaking into a cold sweat, because a moment of inattention could cost him his life. He was holding a silver spear in his hand. They are now off to seek the foundation of the chemical industry, which is the highly corrosive sulfuric acid, and enveloping the sulfuric acid is the even more deadly hydrogen sulfide, which can take your life in an instant. The silver spear reacts with hydrogen sulfide and turns black, so he was assigned to lead as a detector. After walking for an unknown length of time, Senku and the others finally arrived. The lake in front of them shimmered with a faint blue light, tugging at Jinro's heart like a sacred goddess. Unconsciously, he walked towards the water, and after a few steps, the tip of the spear turned black. Senku shouted loudly but failed to wake him up. In a critical moment, Kahaku promptly pulled him back, thus preventing his fall into the deadly waters. The lake in front of them was indeed the highly corrosive sulfuric acid. Realizing this, Jinro shivered in a corner. But sulfuric acid is a key step in making antibiotics, without which antibiotics cannot be made. Kahaku, aiming to save her sister, decided to make a forced attempt to obtain it quickly using speed. But Senku stopped this idea, as speed alone is not enough to succeed. Now, there's only one way, which is to quickly make a gas mask. The process of making a gas mask is surprisingly simple. First, use a magnifying glass to roast bamboo. Then dump in potassium carbonate and lye water all at once. Grind all the materials into powder, and soak the activated carbon filled with potassium carbonate, which can neutralize and absorb the toxic gases, providing excellent protection. Thus, a simple gas mask is made. At night, Senku finds Chrome, deciding to go alone to the sulfuric acid lake to collect the acid. This simple gas mask posed too great a risk, and this experiment offered no chance for errors. A mistake meant death. So, he asked Chrome to stay in the village, to inherit the scientific knowledge he held, and continue the achievements of 2 million years of human civilization, should anything happen to him. However, Chrome harshly refused this decision. If Senku were to die while collecting sulfuric acid, then the scientific civilization would also perish, for he would never take up the mantle of science, unless Senku could ensure his own safe return. And if he accompanied him, the two scientists could look out for each other. He also wanted to become a trusted figure to Senku, just like Taiju and Yuzuriha. Seeing Chrome's determination, Senku reluctantly agreed to take him along. Meanwhile, Kahaku, sitting in a tree and eavesdropping, saw in Chrome a reflection of her past self. reminded of her own experiences, fighting for her sister's life. Kahaku had refused to take over as the village's priestess after her sister's death, devoting herself instead to curing her sister, thus fighting for her sister's life for 10 years with hot spring water. Unfortunately, Chrome lacked natural combat talent, or else he would have been the best candidate to marry her sister. The next day, the two equipped themselves and set off for the perilous sulfuric acid lake. When the silver spear turned black, Chrome's survival instincts made him tremble non-stop, frightened by Senku's casual demeanor, who explained that worrying too much could lead to increased breathing, potentially causing the gas mask to fail. Soon Chrome noticed that Senku's hands were also trembling non-stop. Indeed, the more one knows, the greater the fear in the heart. Influenced by Senku, Chrome finally mustered up his courage. On the other hand, Jinro was still frightened by his near fall into the sulfuric acid lake, but after some encouragement from the old craftsman, Jinro also cheered up. Conveniently, the old craftsman had made an extra gas mask, and Senku and Chrome's sulfuric acid collection task was nearing completion. At that moment, Chrome noticed that sulfuric acid had dripped onto Senku's breathing tube. Fortunately, Senku quickly averted a tragedy, but then Chrome suddenly stepped into empty air, and Senku couldn't rescue him in time. Thankfully, Jinro arrived just in time and saved Chrome with his silver spear. Eventually, the sulfuric acid solution was successfully collected, and the most essential materials and equipment were gathered. Next was the production of antibiotics. Each chemical sample could be deadly, but the next chemical, ammonia water, was harmless. The two obtained ammonia water through urination. To Kahaku's amazement, the process diagram for the antibiotic was now more than half complete. All that was left was to obtain alcohol, and the antibiotic could be completed. Speaking of which, Chrome was ready to start brewing. A passing old craftsman told them that if they won the competition tomorrow, there would be as much alcohol as they wanted to drink. It seemed that the Kingdom of Science must win this competition. The rules did not state that outsiders could not participate in the written test, so Senku also successfully registered. They planned for everyone to participate in the competition to exhaust Maguma's energy as much as possible, clearing the way for Kinro, who was most likely to win. However, Kinro scoffed at this tactic, but Kahaku believed that any means were acceptable to win the contest. As it was a matter of life and death for her sister Ruri, the men prepared stimulants to enhance everyone's overall ability. As there was no drug test in the competition, after taking them, not only would their strength and stamina greatly increase, but they would also look more handsome than usual. Even the usually weak Chrome did not sit idle. He practiced his lethal thrust during the limited time. Soon, the drawing of lots took place, and everyone from the Kingdom of Science hoped that Kinro and Maguma would meet in the final. As Kinro was most likely to defeat Maguma, they planned to weaken Maguma's energy in the earlier rounds, after which it would be up to Jinro. Jinro, the rascal, ended up eating all the ingredients for the stimulants. Suka volunteered to go and pick new ingredients, but all of this was heard clearly by Maguma's cronies. In Maguma's eyes, the only threat to his claim to the village chief title was Kahaku. By eliminating her, he would dominate the competition. Therefore, he ordered his cronies to kidnap Suka and then tell Kahaku that Suka was drowning in the river. Senku saw through the lie at a glance, but Kahaku preferred to err on the side of caution. Despite knowing it was Maguma's trap, she was unwilling to gamble with Suka's life. Since she was the fastest among them, Kahaku immediately went to rescue Suka. Meanwhile, the first contest officially began, with Kinro facing Maguma in a battle between the village's two strongest fighters. This was undoubtedly the most anticipated match of all the contests. Maguma began to mock Kinro, saying that if Kinro would lick his shoes in public, he would definitely make good use of him once he becomes the village chief. However, Kinro, having undergone a month of grueling training, was no longer the same person he once was. Meanwhile, the bound Suka struggled fiercely, and after several rotations, the ropes loosened, allowing her to escape. Back at the duel arena, Maguma had to take the fight seriously and deliberately kept his distance from Kinro. Little did he know that this exposed Kinro's weakness. His blurred vision due to nearsightedness made it impossible for him to judge distances accurately. Just then, Suka hurried to the scene and immediately realized from Kinro's squinting eyes that he suffered from the same vision problem as hers. Unable to judge distances, Kinro was beaten badly and was on the verge of losing the match. At this critical moment, Suka threw her helmet to Kinro with all her might, and he caught it successfully, transforming into the Watermelon Knight. With the help of the lenses, Kinro's vision instantly upgraded from standard definition to 4K, and he finally experienced the magic of science. Maguma's every attack was easily countered by Kinro, and he was quickly knocked down. However, Maguma retaliated by questioning the referee, claiming the watermelon helmet was sorcery and thus against the rules. As Kinro turned to check with the referee, Maguma launched a surprise attack from behind, shattering the watermelon helmet and knocking Kinro unconscious. Although Kinro did not defeat Maguma, he drained a lot of his energy, and it was still possible for someone else to defeat him. As it was a team battle, the second match was Chrome against Maguma's underling, which looked more like a brawl between weaklings with no entertainment value. Chrome's main goal was to buy time until Kahaku's return. Sensing Senku and the other's strategy, Maguma immediately ordered his underling to surrender, saying, "I give up." The third match began with Senku versus Kahaku. Kahaku did not make it in time, and Senku advanced smoothly. Now, the only hope for the Kingdom of Science was Jinro. As the fourth match began, Jinro, having ingested a large amount of stimulant ingredients, was overly confident in his abilities. In his eyes, he looked 2.5 times more handsome than usual, but to outsiders, he seemed like he had drunk cheap liquor. Jinro struck first with his spear, hitting his opponent's abdomen and feeling the thrill of the stimulants for the first time. As the dust settled, his opponent was gasping for breath, while Jinro still brimmed with energy. However, this was all in Jinro's imagination. He had actually been beaten to a pulp. Despite this, his opponent, terrified by Jinro's apparent insensitivity to pain, kept retreating, and with just a light push, Jinro knocked him into the water, advancing to the next round. At this moment, the side effects of the stimulants became apparent as Jinro collapsed in front of the entire village. Completely exhausted, his combat power is now almost zero. The finals are slowly beginning. The first match is Maguma versus Chrome. This means that the hope of the Science Kingdom now rests on Chrome. Chrome first uses the Break Lineage Club, but it's obviously unwise to confront directly. When Chrome is defeated, the cunning Maguma, knowing Chrome's feelings for Ruri, doesn't rush to decide the outcome but keeps beating him. At that moment, Chrome discovers the broken watermelon mask in front of him, grabs a handful of sand, temporarily blinding Maguma, and quickly protects the mask. However, Chrome still has no strength to fight back, and Maguma continues his fierce attacks. Just then, Chrome suddenly places the watermelon mask in front of Maguma. Seeing this, everyone is baffled. But Senku immediately sees through Chrome's intention. He wants to use the glasses to focus light and ignite Maguma's clothes. However, nearsighted glasses are concave lenses and cannot focus light. Chrome states that he is at least half a scientist and understands this. Just now, Chrome had dripped sweat onto the concave lens, creating a convex lens capable of starting a fire. At this moment, Jen appears, believing it will take a long time to ignite. The highly intelligent Senku calculates that it will take at least 60 seconds to ignite. To buy time for Chrome, Jen climbs onto the roof and loudly calls out Maguma's name. When Maguma sees the sorcerer, he killed himself miraculously alive again. He is inevitably fearful of sorcery. Jen takes advantage of this, first gesturing randomly and throwing out petals, then telling Maguma he has cast a spell on him. If he moves, his heart will explode. The primitive man is indeed easy to fool. He is scared stiff. Soon, sparks ignite in Maguma's crotch, just because he lightly patted it, and the flames quickly spread over his body. Chrome's ultimate move finally comes into play, and he wins the match for the Science Kingdom. Now the field is filled with allies. Suddenly, Jinro fiercely attacks Senku. Caught off guard, Jinro has just learned that the champion not only marries the beautiful witch but also gains the supreme position of village chief, making him increasingly crazed. Chrome suddenly throws the watermelon mask. Jinro, thinking Senku is about to use some sorcery, rushes to stop him, but is directly defeated by Senku using principles. Poor Jinro again ends up foaming at the mouth. Senku advances to the final. Now, if Senku concedes, Chrome can become the champion and marry Ruri, but at this critical moment, Chrome faints due to exhaustion. Senku becomes the final winner, leading to the most awkward scene in history. This is definitely the quickest divorce in history. He had just become the bridegroom of this term's witch, and the next second, he directly proposes a divorce. So be it. After the divorce, taking only a large amount of alcohol and vinegar with him, leaving behind a baffled crowd. Now, with all the ingredients for making antibiotics finally gathered, the old artist is ready to forcibly recruit Jan, the leisure person, for help, but he refuses, until the old artist shows off his muscular body. Then he agrees to help. As for the unconscious Chrome, Senku has his own ways. He forcibly woke Chrome using ammonia water. Next, just mix all the materials obtained, and you can create a scientific panacea. Members of the Kingdom of Science collaborated. Finally, after a night of mixing experiments, the antibiotic was completed. also the fruit of their hardships over the past half year. Now Ruri's illness can finally be cured, since Jen is not from the village. He cannot enter the village. When he returned to the laboratory, a bottle of secret recipe chilled cola was on the table. This was also a promise between Jen and Senku. Having not drunk cola in 3,700 years, he showed a genuine smile. Senku and others arrived at the village, poured out the antibiotics from the jar, and then administered them to Ruri. Then Senku used a glass beaker to auscultate Ruri. Inside Ruri's body, he heard goat-like noises, proving that there was a lot of fluid in Ruri's lungs. Senku suddenly found on the side a dead mouse and a skeleton lying there. He brought the mouse back to the laboratory, preparing to dissect the mouse. Senku found that the mouse's lungs had a red inflammation response. It seems the mouse died from a bacterial infection, and the mouse might have been infected by Ruri. A disagreement arose. Although antibiotics are called panaceas, if Ruri has tuberculosis, even antibiotics would be ineffective. Then Ruri's fate can be imagined. At this time, Suka brought back the news. Ruri is now coughing continuously, also showing such severe symptoms for the first time. The villagers believe that the white powder Senku fed Ruri caused it. The Kingdom of Science and others rushed over. Seeing Ruri's reaction, Senku was momentarily stunned. Then the old village chief suddenly grabbed Senku by the neck, questioning why he wanted to harm the shrine maiden. But Senku just smirked sinisterly, as if everything was under control. He found that the bacteria in Ruri's body had started to take things seriously. Even the harmless bacteria around had joined the camp of toxic genetic factors. This is the special skill of the pneumococcal bacteria, which means Ruri's diagnosis is pneumonia. But fortunately, antibiotics are the nemesis of pneumonia, meaning just by taking antibiotics on time, Ruri's illness can be cured. Human science has won. Seeing this youngster still making things up, the old village chief swung a punch at him, but it was caught by his daughter Kahaku. The old father had no choice but to compromise. Now, there were no other options. Under the relentless efforts of the Kingdom of Science members, antibiotics were continuously sent into the village, and Ruri's illness was finally eradicated. Seeing his healthy daughter, the old father shed tears unintentionally, and then declared Senku the new village chief of Ishigami village.